I hope you'll all please join me in giving a very warm welcome to HUD Secretary Shaun Donovan.
Mary, thank you so much. And I have to admit, when I started the negotiations with the 49 Attorneys General, I didn't think we could get it done either. But I do have a sister who's a psychiatrist who's diagnosed me as a malignant optimist, completely incurable. And it seemed to work this time, with a little help from some friends like Lisa Madigan, who was just absolutely remarkable in that process. So thank you for recognizing that. And I really do want to make sure we recognize Mary for her remarkable leadership. Having been a former chair of a city housing finance agency, knowing what it takes to provide that leadership every day, and having watched Mary work, she is just a remarkable leader. You are so lucky to have one of the very best around the country. Let's give her a round of applause. And you should know that I do whatever Mary and Governor Quinn tell me to do. I saw her about 6 months ago, and she said, I need one thing from you, to come to our affordable housing conference the next spring. I said, I'll be there. And I am so happy to be here today. And I really also want to recognize Governor Quinn's leadership. I had the pleasure to sit next to him at the White House at a governor's dinner, and I hadn't known him that well before. We met in a number of places, and they literally were taking away our food basically uneaten because Governor Quinn and I had so much to talk about. He's just so energetic, so driven to get things done for the people of Illinois. He's a remarkable leader, and I know that he will continue to be a real champion for affordable housing going forward. So I will admit that it was not a huge, difficult sell for Mary to get me here for another reason as well. And that is that of all the places in the country that I can travel to really see what's happening on the cutting edge of affordable housing, Illinois is one of those places. And every time I come here, what I see is a remarkable partnership between the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the foundation world, in doing just remarkable work. And so I really do, I love coming here to see what's happening in affordable housing. And just to put a fine point on that, I just came from the Pullman Wheelworks apartments on the South Side, where I saw a remarkable partnership come together. And I saw what happens when you have a federal government that actually works with local partners like you to preserve affordable housing and, more broadly, to revitalize an entire community. Located in a neighborhood that was once the hub of a nationwide rail network, and itself a former rail car factory, for 30 years, Pullman Wheelworks has struggled with crime, disrepair, and a neighborhood plagued by boarded-up homes and storefronts, problems that only got deeper in the wake of this economic crisis we're emerging from. But with the leadership of partners like Mercy Housing, Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, the City of Chicago, and of course IHDA itself, HUD investments are helping transform the Pullman Wheelworks and the entire neighborhood that surrounds it. With $12 million in HUD funding, support from a range of nonprofit partners, and a $2 million bridge loan from, of course, the MacArthur Foundation. You can't do anything in Chicago without having the MacArthur Foundation standing behind you. Our partners are rehabbing Pullman Wheelworks to new energy-efficient standards, reducing energy costs for 210 families, and preserving the key neighborhood anchor for decades to come. And with investments that are attacking vacancy and blight in the surrounding community, Pullman's families are beginning to see a neighborhood that suffered a 20% population loss in the last decade begin to turn around. But our work in Pullman represents an even deeper transformation that I really want to focus on today. One that, with President Obama's leadership, is happening across the federal government itself. Indeed, Pullman represents the first time HUD has ever sold its debt obligation to a local nonprofit to support this kind of preservation work. It's the first time, in fact, that we've ever sold a mark-to-market subordinate note as part of a preservation transaction. And now, most places I would go, if I weren't in a room like this, I probably wouldn't mention a mark-to-market subordinate note. And it points out three things. One is that, yes, I'm a housing policy wonk just like the rest of you, and I actually know what a mark-to-market subordinate note is. Second, it points out that this is a group of housers that is always producing firsts. So many of the things that we've done for the first time have been here in Chicago and Illinois. We've got a great HUD team here with Antonio Riley and Ed Hinsberger and so many others that you've worked with. But third, and perhaps most importantly, it points out that I think we're finally getting to a place where HUD is a partner that, instead of asking why should we do this differently, why should we depart and try to do a first ever in a deal like Pullman Wheelworks, I think we're starting to ask, why not? Why can't we do things differently? Why can't we be the flexible partner that you need at the local level? And so I want to talk to you about the work that we're doing more broadly to catch up to all of you in the private and the third sectors in your use of cutting-edge tools to support affordable housing and to strengthen our communities. I want to talk to you about what the Obama administration is doing to embrace these tools more broadly. And I want to discuss the work that we've done not just at HUD, but throughout the federal government to bring programs and policies into the 21st century. How we're partnering across agencies, leveraging private capital, and using a mixed finance, mixed income approach to better serve your community and so many other communities across the country. And I want to tell you about how through this work, we're finally trying to provide you with the creative, responsive federal partner that you need, and most importantly, that the families and the communities that you care about and work on behalf of every day, the partner that they need to preserve their homes and to build truly sustainable communities. Now, all of this requires HUD to move out of the 20th century and into the 21st century. And throughout my career, at the local level, at HUD the first time, most recently as commissioner in New York City, where I like to say I was HUD's biggest customer, I've seen the remarkable hard work and commitment, the dedication that HUD employees have to help vulnerable families and communities every single day. But I've also seen how an outdated, one-size-fits-all approach and a failure to allow local partners like IHDA and all of you in this room to have the flexibility to do the best possible work that you can, how that often means we can't take full advantage of the extraordinary resource of the people that we have at HUD. That's why we've forged a rental housing policy working group with our partners at the Department of Treasury and the Department of Agriculture to identify ways we could better respond to the affordable housing needs of local communities. One of the most important things that's come out of that working group was ideas for reforming and expanding the low-income housing tax credit. Now, I don't have to tell you, over the last quarter century, the tax credit has helped finance the construction and preservation of more than 1.8 million affordable rental homes, created more than 3.6 million jobs, and leveraged more than $75 billion in private capital. Just in the 1990s, the tax credit was responsible for more than half of all of our multifamily production in this country. It's an amazing record, And I have to say, I'm enormously proud that in the heat of this crisis, the Obama administration came into office and through the Recovery Act literally saved the tax credit market at a time when private capital had all but dried up for affordable housing. Now, you'd think with such a powerful tool like the tax credit at our disposal that the federal government would make it as easy as possible for our partners to use it. But all too often, that hasn't been the case. Investors using the tax credit who wanted to access FHA financing had to follow FHA's standard approval process. And given the complexities of tax credit deals, the Pullman Wheelworks this morning, 12 different sources of financing. Given these complexities that you know all too well, getting an FHA deal done could often take a year or more. Not only did that leave critically important affordable housing stuck in the pipeline, it discouraged so many potential private investors and partners from bringing their money to the table in the first place, leaving millions of dollars of private capital on the sidelines at a time when we needed it most. So that's why in February, with the leadership of our just terrific acting FHA Commissioner Carol Galante, we announced a new pilot program in 4 cities, including Chicago, to streamline our approval process. With this pilot, our Office of Multifamily Housing believes it can cut the time needed to review and approve financing for tax credit-assisted transactions from a year or more to as little as 90 days. Now, last year, we endorsed more than $500 million in commitments for tax credit projects. That's a 150% increase since President Obama took office. But we're not stopping there. With this pilot program, we fully expect those numbers to keep rising year after year. And this pilot is just one part of our renewed effort to expand access to mixed finance tools like the tax credit. By reviewing, streamlining, and simplifying our regulations, ensuring that we're not only keeping investors who are dedicated to affordable housing, but also bringing more in who might otherwise have been scared off by the possibility of working with the federal government. That's why the Section 202 reform bill that President Obama signed into law was so important. The bill made critical changes to that program and to 811 so that senior housing developments for people with disabilities, can leverage the private capital they need to build and preserve far more units, while making the program more sustainable over the long term. And it's why the President's proposed 2013 budget includes a basis boost proposal to increase tax credits available to preserve federally assisted housing and would allow for income averaging, which will be especially helpful for tax credit properties in regions with high rents, just like the place we're sitting today. Of course, no kind of affordable housing is in greater need of these innovative mixed finance tools than our public housing. Right now, public housing is at a critical crossroads. We just completed a study that shows there's a $26 billion backlog in funding for public housing. We've already lost 150,000 units of public housing in the past 15 years, and if we don't act now, that crisis is going to accelerate. At the same time, we've got 7 million households paying more than half their income for rent, living in substandard housing, or both, and the need for affordable housing is growing. But for too long, antiquated rules prevented anyone but the federal government from investing in the success of public housing. That's why last year I was so proud that Congress agreed to a demonstration that would allow these properties to access private capital and equity just like every other form of affordable housing can do today. For the public housing and mod rehab programs, it allows traditional subsidies to be replaced with long-term project-based Section 8 rental contracts. For these programs, as well as the programs I call our orphan programs, Rent Sup and RAP, contracts can also be converted into project-based vouchers. This demonstration will allow public housing authorities and owners to leverage private funding to address the capital needs of tens of thousands of publicly owned homes across the country. Just for these units, we think it's $1 billion in private capital that can be raised. And that will help every precious dollar we have go further in this tough fiscal environment we live in today. Now, we've just made available for comment the draft notice to implement the RAD demonstration. And as the new kind of partner I'm describing today, we really want to know what you think. We need your input. And it's critical to making sure that this demonstration is as powerful as we think it can be. The notice is available on our website at HUD.gov. The comment period's open for just a little while longer, April 23rd. The more you tell us what we got right and what we need to do better, the more effective this demonstration will be for you and all of you that can use it. But to become the true partner all of you need, we have to do more than just transform HUD. We have to extend these sorts of innovative tools throughout the federal government. We have to follow your lead and ensure that we're partnering with the private and the third sectors to drive change in all communities across the country. Now, everyone knows about what Hope 6 has accomplished. Over 90,000 new homes in healthy mixed-income communities that were once devastated by distressed public housing, how Hope 6 has raised the average income of residents by 75% and forged creative public-private partnerships in our communities. But you also know that the obstacles faced by low-income families aren't limited to those who live in public housing. Just ask the families living in Chicago's Woodlawn neighborhood, who for decades have struggled with disinvestment, failing schools, troubled housing, and little opportunity. Ground zero for Woodlawn's decline is a federally subsidized housing development called Grove Park. Housing that, because it was privately owned, wouldn't qualify for a Hope 6 award. Now, if you ask the person living in Grove Park whether they care that they're public housing or privately assisted housing, if you ask the average person across this country, if I asked any one of you, you wouldn't care about that distinction. You'd say we ought to have tools to renovate any kind of affordable housing that's in that level of distress. The only people that made that distinction was HUD. We were the only folks that said, well, it's a different program. We don't have a solution. Breaking down those kind of barriers is why the Obama administration forged the Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative across 5 different federal agencies, ensuring that for the first time, communities facing interconnected problems would have a federal partner focused on bottom-up, interconnected solutions. At the center of the administration's initiative is a tool called Choice Neighborhoods, which gives local leaders the ability to use proven mixed finance tools available to not just transform public housing, but all kinds of housing in high-poverty neighborhoods. And last year, I was proud to stand with Mayor Emanuel to present a $30 million Choice Neighborhoods Award to Woodlawn. Again, another first in Illinois, the first ever HUD Revitalization Award given to privately owned affordable housing. And what's more, that grant recognized that it wasn't just about the housing. In the midst of all of this lack of opportunity, just blocks away, you had one of the world's greatest academic institutions. And so we're partnering with the University of Chicago, their Urban Education Institute, to make sure that Choice Neighborhoods grant turns around not just the bricks and mortar of Grove Park, but the neighborhood schools, that it brings vital assets like a grocery store, a youth center, and improved access to public transportation to access the real opportunity of jobs, bring all of that to Woodlawn. Now, of course, the challenges of bringing mixed finance, mixed income tools to our communities don't end at the end of the block or even at the city line. That's why we've joined with our partners at the Department of Transportation and EPA to create the Partnership for Sustainable Communities, which is providing $270 million in sustainable communities planning grants to localities that are working to align housing and community development needs, not just in a neighborhood, not just across a city, but across an entire region. These funds are making a difference right here in the Chicago Metro, where a local partnership is using a $4.2 million grant from HUD to plan smart investments in affordable housing, create walkable neighborhoods, and capitalize on this region's rich public transportation system to drive growth and new job creation. And so we're making real progress. But as you all know, we haven't reached quite management nirvana at HUD. We've still got farther to go. But we also need to scale up these efforts. We need Congress to act to make sure that we can bring these tools not just to a cutting-edge leader like Chicago, but to every community across the country. We need Congress to pass the President's Project Rebuild, which just alone in Illinois would provide $500 million to renovate and rebuild buildings and neighborhoods that have been shattered by this crisis. Project Rebuild alone in Illinois would create about 4,500 construction jobs throughout the state by putting people to work rehabilitating those homes, local businesses, and entire communities. And as you've done here so ingeniously, use that funding to leverage private capital and a whole range of public-private collaboration. Project Rebuild would build on existing neighborhood stabilization efforts with new innovations. First, we've realized from the efforts that you've made here that even if we rebuild every home in a community, until we have decent retail and commercial available in those communities, we're not going to truly revitalize those neighborhoods. And so we've added a component that would allow up to 30% of Project Rebuild to be used for commercial and retail structures in those neighborhoods. And for the first time, we've allowed for-profits to be direct partners in that work, ensuring that the private sector partners that have been fully engaged in neighborhood revitalization efforts can be full partners in this next wave of transformation that Project Rebuild would bring. We also need to make sure that we fight for the $100 million that the President's asked for to fund our Sustainable Communities grants, which were eliminated by the House last year. We need to continue making, even in tough times, the kind of catalytic investments that not only build job growth that I talked about, but also are key to extending the impact of our formula investments like community development block grants. For me, for President Obama, it's simple. At a moment like this, when every dollar is precious, the federal government needs to be using every tool at our disposal. He understands, as you do, that to preserve affordability for the long term, we need to invest in our neighborhoods and work with partners from every sector. He understands it because he's lived and worked in those communities. Just a few blocks from Pullman is Altgeld Gardens, the public housing community the President was a community organizer in his first work. He's not only walked the halls of public housing here in Chicago, he's walked the streets of our most struggling neighborhoods across this country. He knows that to create an economy built to last, we have to bring all our partners to the table. After all, in the words of your mayor, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Because with any crisis comes an opportunity for change, for new thinking, for new investments, and most importantly, for new partnerships that affirm not only the importance of HUD, but of a federal government that understands the challenges our communities face. This moment is our opportunity to lead our communities into the 21st century using 21st century tools. You know the power of these tools. And in the Obama administration, you finally have a federal partner who knows that power as well. a partner willing to bring the full scale of America's public, private, and third sectors to bear so that we can not only tackle our community's toughest challenges, but actually solve them. Working together, I know that we will. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your leadership here in Chicago and across the state of Illinois. And most of all, thank you for your partnership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Donovan, for those comments. And, you know, I just want to say personally, for anyone that's worked with HUD over the last couple of years, you know, Secretary Donovan truly has ushered in a new era of, I think, flexibility and collaboration that at least in all of my time in affordable housing, I have never seen. And he's also given us a wonderful regional director who really brings those initiatives to the fore as well, Antonio Riley. So thank you so much, Secretary Donovan, for being here today. I'm so humbled to be in your presence and for all your great leadership at HUD. Thank you. Thank you. The Secretary has graciously offered to answer some questions and answers, and we have a couple of people with microphones in the audience. So if you have a question, if you'd like to step up or flag someone with a microphone, please introduce yourself and your organization, and you can ask the question.
I guess I'm not bashful. My name is Mike Frigo. I work at a place called Mays Lake Village that has 600 apartments with the Section 202 program. Love the partnership with HUD. We've been there since 1965, so thank you and your staff. I realize in looking at the budget, we had to make a big cutback to Section 202, which I understand. Going into the future, where do you think we'll be in 3, 4, 5, 10 years? Because we get 5 to 10 requests a day for affordable senior housing, and I know there's 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day. So,
yeah, absolutely critical question. And this is, if you'd asked me a couple years ago where we were, I mean, I was really worried about the potential elimination of the 202 program. And having run the 202 program when I was at HUD the first time, it has a special place for me. What makes me more optimistic today is that, you know, in an era where folks generally think nothing bipartisan ever happens in Washington, we can't get stuff done, thanks to just remarkable work on behalf of so many of you that work on 202 and 811, we got this legislation passed that I mentioned in my remarks. I will say it was particularly gratifying for me because the first time I was at HUD, I had worked on drafting the legislation that allowed tax credits to be used with 202 for the first time. I then went to run the agency in New York, and I had the distinction of imposing on my great team in New York doing some of the first mixed finance transactions in 202 across the country. And they came back to me and said, never make me do that again. So I realized pretty quickly that there was more we needed to do to make 202 and 811 able to be used as mixed finance tools. And I actually think, between the great work of Carol Galante and the team in multifamily, that we've got it right now. And what you'll see this year as we put out the 202 and 811 competitions is a focused effort on really using 202 and 811 resources to get to extremely low-income seniors and people with disabilities. And I think if you look at what's happened as senior housing has evolved, most of the senior housing that's being produced today, affordable senior housing, is tax credit housing, as you all know. And what's really limited is the ability to get those units down to extremely low income. And so what you're going to see us focus on is providing for the first time a basically rental assistance only option for 202 and 811 that can be matched with tax credits much more easily than the brain damage we went through at HPD to do those first mixed finance deals. I can't promise it'll be perfect. We'll need your input and we'll continue refining it. But it's a real opportunity, and we'll be able to do more than 5 times more units per dollar of HUD money that reach extremely low-income seniors by doing that. So where I feel like we are now is we've earned some credibility and trust with Congress that we're really looking at how do we stretch these dollars as far as possible, how do we make the program more flexible. What we need to do now, and this isn't just on 202 and 811, is make the case more broadly that these investments are critical to the future, that not only do we save money by helping seniors live someplace that's, you know, a less, we don't want them moving to nursing homes if they don't have to, right? We don't want them to have expensive costs in assisted living or elsewhere if they can stay at home in a 202 and 811. We need to make the case that this is good for seniors, good for our families and communities, but also good for the taxpayer in the long run, and really make that case. And that's, look, we're at a pretty fundamental place in this country in terms of deciding whether we're going to continue to invest in our most vulnerable families, our most vulnerable communities. And this is a president who said, you know, I'm not going to balance the budget on the backs of the most vulnerable in this country. So we need to really make that case. I think we're all doing our part to make these programs more effective and efficient, but now we have to go argue and make that case to Congress.
Hi, my name is Al Kendall. I'm the board member of Interfaith Housing. Will you be doing any special programs around the issue of supportive housing in addition to veteran housing as well, supportive housing, to support that as an initiative?
Absolutely. For those of you that don't know, a veteran is 50% more likely to be homeless than the average American. It is absolutely shameful that in this country we allow that to happen. And so the President and the First Lady have made a commitment that we are going to end veterans' homelessness by 2015. And this is a promise that we are backing up with action. Last year, we lowered the number of veterans sleeping on our streets by 18% in 1 year. So we are making real progress. And one of the ways that we're making progress is through what we call the VASH program. And that combines Section 8 vouchers with supportive services that come from the Veterans Administration. When the President came into office, we had less than 5,000 veterans that were actually using these vouchers. Today, we're close to 30,000 and increasing by 10,000 a year. We've been able to win in our budget. So that's an area where we're making real progress. But we need to do more around supportive housing as well. One of the things I think you're going to see us do is target our supportive housing this year. And just to be clear, the President has asked for a 15% increase in our budget this year for our targeted homeless programs. So that would mean thousands of new units of supportive housing. But what we have to do collectively, for those of you who work on supportive housing, is make sure that we are getting the right resources to the right folks. In a time when our resources are so limited, we can't afford to use the wrong tool for the wrong family. And that means where we have deep supportive services available in supportive housing, we really have to target those to the chronically homeless and the folks who most need them. At the same time, we're working with housing authorities on vouchers in public housing, working with our private owners to try to make sure that families who are coming out of shelter, that are at risk of losing their homes, that we're prioritizing them in our mainstream programs where we don't need to pair them with the same deep supportive services. And so getting that targeting right is going to be a very important priority for us this year as we work through the budget to expand supportive housing more broadly across the country.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean Marie Kapp. I'm from the Renaissance Companies here in Chicago. And I'm sure you're aware that legislation has been introduced in both the House and the Senate regarding fixing the 9% floor for LIHTC and also fixing the 4% acquisition credit. And I'd like to ask how you, Mr. Secretary, could assist us in gaining more co-sponsorship in the House and in the Senate to get this critical legislation passed before the credit expires at the end of 13.
Yep. I'm glad you asked the question, and what I would add to that, I mentioned in my remarks the basis boost proposal, the income averaging proposal. What I didn't mention is that Treasury has included in the budget as well a set of proposals that would broaden the investor base for tax credits. So there's a whole range of important steps that can happen, and fixing the 4% and the 9% credits, I would put among that group of very high priorities. I know Mary is working with NCSHA, and that's a top issue on their priority list. To be frank, I think the real issue here is there a chance of getting tax legislation done? And I would have to say I'm not the legislative guy, but it sure looks to me like the chances of doing that are slim prior to the election. I think the real opportunity is potentially even very soon after the election, if there is a tax bill moving, to have a very limited, targeted set of fixes to the tax credit that we would want to include in any piece that's moving. And I will say, one of the challenges, and this is, it's important for an audience like this to hear this. From where I sit in Washington, there are times where the housing community speaks with many voices. And I think what's critical here is to bring the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector together with as much agreement as possible around a short list, or what are the top priorities around tax credits that we would want to get done in any tax bill when it moves. And we have to do that to be prepared and basically do the groundwork that needs to be done to get to a point where when tax legislation actually does move, that this will be part of it. So what I'd love to do is work with all of you, particularly work with NCSHA, that's been such a champion of the tax credit program, to really agree on a set of targeted fixes that could move forward. It's something we've done a lot of work on with the White House and Treasury across the administration. We're prepared to put all of our weight behind a set of changes to the tax credit, including the floor. But it's one that we have to all come together with one voice as much as we possibly can. I know you want to get on to dessert. Any more questions? Last one.
Last one. Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here. It's huge. What I want to talk about, we develop for a lot of housing authorities and put together mixed finance developments. As we've talked about the Hope 6 being a successful program, most of what's been successful with public housing has been the demolition of public housing, the replacement with new housing. And now all of a sudden we seem to see a major shift where getting an application through the SAC office approved for the demolition of public housing. And it's frustrating because what worked before can still work today, but there seems to be a mindset change, and I was wondering if you could address that and tell me how we get that fixed.
You heard me talk about choice neighborhoods, and I don't think there's any change in terms of a recognition that there are a set of properties where fundamental change, where demolition and revitalization is necessary. And that will absolutely continue. It's going to happen in Woodlawn with the Choice Neighborhoods Award, and it's happening with the dozens of Choice Neighborhoods planning grants and implementation awards that we've done around the country, 75% of which are still directed at public housing and really try to carry on the legacy of Hope 6. So we continue to do that. And I also think you'll see in the RAD demonstration that there is a significant number of those properties where there will be some demolition that's included as well. I think to the extent that there are any new things that we're trying to do, one thing I would point out is that what we're trying to make sure of is that where there is a demolition, that we're not losing units of deeply affordable housing. And so we have been looking more closely in the SAC at what is being replaced. And clearly, the issue is not, is it replaced, on that site? Because you're never going to be able to reach true mixed income if you're replacing every unit of public housing on the site. But we are looking to communities to come together, as we do in choice neighborhoods, and to make sure that there is that we maintain as much deeply affordable housing as possible. We just simply, given our budget challenges, can't afford to lose more deeply affordable public housing. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is we also want to make sure that we preserve public housing before we need to demolish as well. And I think there is public housing that can be preserved without demolition. It may have to be demolished if we don't save it soon enough and we don't preserve it. And that's really where RAD is focused, is how do we make sure that public housing, which is the only kind of housing that for too long hasn't been able to get access to tax credits and these other tools except through Hope 6, which is a very narrow group of properties. We have to open up those tools to all public housing. Our PHAs are some of the most entrepreneurial owners and managers and developers even in the country right now, but they've had one hand tied behind their back because they haven't been able to access these other tools. And so we want to put them in a position where they can do mixed income, they can do preservation without necessarily having to get to the point where a property needs to be demolished. In some cases, that's going to be the best route, but in others, we can do preservation and achieve saving that housing for the next generation through other kinds of tools. And that's really, so I think what you've seen is added to Choice Neighborhoods and Hope 6 is this new tool of the rental assistance demonstration that's going to make sure we can open up those mixed finance tools to just about any kind of public housing. Thank you all so much. Thank you again for the work that you're doing every day in your communities around this state. Thank you.